Next up for us today is someone we really want to talk to because it's really been hot and it's going to get hotter. Please welcome Chief Bryan Gallimore, who's an assistant chief with the Forsyth County Emergency Services Department. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I know our listeners are going to pull themselves up closer to their radios to listen to what you got to tell us about how do we deal with this heat. So, before we go into a lot of it, tell us about the Emergency Services Unit. What do they do for us during this time?
So, well, emergency services are made up of three different divisions. Primarily EMS is probably the largest division, which is your ambulance service here in the county. We also have a 911 center who takes in the 911 calls for medical and fire emergencies. And then also we do have fire prevention and suppression that work within the county as well.
Okay, so we have all these three units.
Yes, sir.
And you deal specifically with, I won't even say specifically, I would just say you deal with the heat in a way that you can help us to know what do you get in terms of calls when it's hot like this?
That's a great question. So EMS typically sees an increase in call volume during hot weather. We don't really get a lot of calls that people call and say, I'm hot. I've got a heat-related emergency. But we deal with a lot of calls that are complaints that are definitely related to the heat. We see increases in calls for folks suffering for altered mental status. They're unconscious, dizziness. They're complaining of generalized weakness and even shortness of breath. And then, once we get there and we look at the history, we look at what their activity and their health level, we determine that, hey, this probably has to do with exposure to extreme heat like we're currently going through right now. So those are kind of the calls that we see in these times.
Well, and I know sometimes you think you get hot and you may have a lot of time to do. So what really happens when you might find yourself with heat issues?
Sure. So we all need to realize that we're not as young as we used to be. And then, honestly, sometimes our younger population, they don't deal with heat like we think they do, right? So a lot of times, we have to be aware that we have complaints, of hey, I feel weak, maybe nauseated, I'm having some cramps, my muscles are cramping a little bit, I just maybe a little dizziness. I need to get inside. I need to get out of the sun. I need to find some shade where it's a little bit cooler, and I need to hydrate. Everybody can quickly degrade in high heat and humidity, but it's really determined by the general health of the individual. Like I said earlier, extremes of age or the very old and the very young are at high risk of heat-related emergencies. But then also people with diseases like asthma, COPD, hypertension, and diabetes, people who are overweight, they're more susceptible to heat-related emergencies. Everybody needs to be cautious in the heat and take steps to hydrate and limit your exposure.
Okay, so you've just given us a few tips about how to protect ourselves. Let's go ahead and give even more about what we can do if we know family members and others that we want to tell them what to do to be safe during the heat wave.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you or your family members can, we should always tell people you should limit your outdoor activity in these days of extreme heat to either early morning or early evening, which are typically the cooler hours of the day. We want to avoid that midday sun. Hydrate, and hydrate some more. Please drink water. A lot of folks, they say, well, I drink coffee and I drink Diet Coke.
Yeah.
That's not hydrating you. Sometimes those sugar and that caffeine can dehydrate you, so it can have the opposite effect. A good rule of thumb for me is, are you frequently urinating? What's the color of urine? Is it clear? Is it a light yellow? If it's dark brown and you're not urinating a lot, you're probably dehydrated. Okay. You need to hydrate some more. If you must be out in the heat, make sure that you have a shaded area that you can get to and make it a rule. Don't try to power through a task like you're working your garden. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to drink some water, and I'm going to get out of this heat. I can be really stubborn. I know I did that yesterday. I was pulling weeds in the garden. I was like, I need to get inside now.
Right.
So, make sure that you wear lightweight clothing, that's light in color and it's loose fitting. That'll help with the heat. Wide brim hats to keep the sun. And then obviously protect your skin, right? We want to protect our skin by using a sunscreen that's an SPF that's 15 or higher, broad spectrum, UVA, UVB protection is the best option, But once again, we want to watch for those early symptoms: cramps, weakness, dizziness, and we'll get out of that sun. I also highly recommend that we make sure that we're checking on our family members and our neighbors, especially if they're elderly. Make sure that they have access to adequate cooling and water. Please, if you have to bring them to your home, but there's also public centers. I know the recreation centers here in town. You can go to them, and they're going to have AC, and you'll be able to kind of cool off in those areas as well. I think if the heat continues, oftentimes I know the city opens up cooling centers, right, where people can go to those. So just kind of watch your news media for that. But make sure you check on those, especially the elderly folks. And then obviously we never want to leave children or pets in a locked car, right? That locked car, and even just mild warm weather can become an oven, and it's got totally a disastrous effect for those who are stuck in that car. I think the most important thing, again, is just knowing how heat can affect you. And you need to monitor yourself and your loved ones, right? And just make sure that you hydrate and that you limit that amount of exposure that you have. You can go to the federal website, www.ready.gov, and they have, advice for essentially any extreme weather from snow. But I mean, you can look at snow, heat,
Right.
tornado prevention, all types of things. There's a lot of good advice on that site to look for.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for coming and sharing information for us that we're going to actually give this recording to the county to post on their website so that we can get that information that you've shared and listen to it and actually put it into place, because it's going to be a hot summer.
Yes, sir. That definitely is.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.